Hi, well, this is Melinda Tankard Reist here, and I'm about to speak with Angela Jones, who is a breast cancer survivor. And Angela has written very powerfully about her own experience of breast cancer and how partnership with the McGrath Foundation makes her feel, the partnership between the charity, the McGrath Foundation, and with Honey Birdette. Now, Angela, can you turn your phone around so that I can see you the other way? Because on my screen, you're sorry, bear with us. This is Angela's first time.
It is. I've never been on this platform before. So
well, it's
I'm
all
just
right.
going to have to hold my phone in my hand.
Well, Angela, it's worth waiting for you to get this right. And it's great to see quite a number of people joining us right now. Thank you so much for being with us and for wanting to listen in to this conversation. So, Angela, can you start by can you tell us a little bit about your story, whatever you might be comfortable to share with us, and why this partnership how it makes you feel, how it makes survivors like yourself feel. So are you able to give us a little bit of that backstory?
Sure. I first found a lump in my breast when I was only 28 years old, and it was a huge shock. I'd never imagined that it would ever happen, and I hesitated to go to the doctor for a number of reasons. One of them was because I had a male doctor, and two, because I was scared. I didn't want to have what I thought was obvious breast cancer. Mm-hmm. And I kind of put it off because in my young mind there wasn't that much awareness about breast cancer, and it was seen as like an old lady disease. And yeah, at the time it was quite traumatic, and I eventually went to the doctor and I was put through straight away for a biopsy. And my lump was malignant, but it was not yet cancer. It was one of those things that's precancerous and could possibly turn. So my lump was removed by a fantastic surgeon. I've got a scar there, but it's well hidden. He managed to perform miracles by, tying up my duct so I was still able to breastfeed my kids. It was a huge ordeal, particularly for someone relatively young. But, looking back, one of my biggest hesitations in seeking help was that I thought of my breasts as a sexual thing as opposed to just a normal part of my anatomy. Like if I'd had a lump on my toe or on my knee, I would have been straight to the doctors and gone, right, do what you need to do. But because it was my breasts and I was a young woman, I was anxious, because I knew that my doctor would have to have a feel of it. And, I'd have to go to various different medical professionals, some of whom were male, a male surgeon, and be poked and prodded at. And I wasn't comfortable with that. Obviously, a few kids later and, life, and now I'm relatively comfortable with my health concerns being dealt with. But, when I think back to that initial time, I realised how influenced I was by the hypersexualisation in society. And how, my health could have been potentially compromised by hesitating to go to the doctor for those reasons. The reason was that I didn't want men to get off on touching breasts, because when we think about breasts, we think about them in the context of sex, because that's all we ever seem to see is breasts, in advertising and in everything in a hypersexualized way. So, this time around, I found another lump in my breast recently, so nearly 20 years later, and, just went straight to the doctor, guess what, it's back. The doctor said, yes, you're right. And I was going to go and have a biopsy, and I was given a referral to a local radiographer, and it was going to cost me $800. But because of the pandemic, I've gone on to the public waiting list, which is, 3 or 4 months. So, yeah, I was sort of sitting here feeling quite horrible about, the prospect of being on a 3 or 4 month waiting list in an overcrowded public hospital system. when I saw that Honey Birdette ad pop up in my Facebook feed where, you know, breast cancer was, you know, basically all about sex. And I was quite mortified.
Was this the first time you'd seen their advertising, or had you been exposed to it before?
I'd seen it before because I'd seen in the media, and including, you know, with Collective Shout, I'd seen that, well, I'd walked past their ads in a shopping centre, and I'd seen, you know, these objectified images of women, this porn practically on the wall, and saw my little son go, oh my God. And so I was aware of the way that they advertised. And then I have seen in the media since then, you know, all the things that they do that objectify and, you know, make, you know, that are just icky, that I don't really think women should be associated with. I mean, there's a big difference between, you know, a woman poutingly selling some lingerie and the BDSM and the pornographic images that this, well, what I call pornographer, but this sex toy shop promotes.
And for you're being objectified, obviously we're being objectified as women. There's these pornified representations. We see the images of women being choked. They're mostly semi-naked. Sometimes we even see, you know, visible crotches. But on top of that, as a breast cancer survivor, can you give us an insight into how this partnership between the McGrath Foundation and Honey Birdette makes you as a survivor feel? Because they would say, well, we're doing it for women with breast cancer. You know, we're getting $30 for every sale of Honey Birdette's pink stockings. We're talking about a multi-billion-dollar company here now because Honey Birdette has been bought out by Playboy. But just, you know, leaving that aside, they would say, well, you know, we're trying to help survivors. So can you give us an insight? What does it feel like for you? And obviously we've heard from many other survivors as well, condemning this partnership.
Well, I think the primary thing is that it's upsetting because, you know, it doesn't take into the consideration that we'll see an ad like that. And then, you know, we may have an appointment with, you know, a male surgeon the next day who's within the age demographic that those sort of things appeal to. And it's just uncomfortable. And, you know, I'm a older breasts and I'm still very aware of the male gaze. It doesn't discriminate. And, you know, I'm, I just awful about it. It makes me self-conscious and feel rather gross. And really that's the primary thing. But it's also really insulting too because breast issues are not sexy. You know, I feel uncomfortable talking about my situation because it's about my breast. If it was a lump on my toe, I would be talking about it on my Facebook feed. I would be, you know, tweeting about it. I would be talking far more comfortably than I am about, you know, part of my anatomy that is, you know, objectified. And, you know, I find it really insulting to people who are going through this process. Because it's, you don't feel sexy, you know, and your greatest fear is not being acceptable enough after you've had the procedure. Like my biggest fear was, you know, that I would be disfigured. I mean, now at this point in my life, if it happens, it happens. But when I was young, I was in so much fear about being disfigured or potentially having to have a mastectomy and how that would impact other people's perception of me. Yeah. Now, I'm kind of angry that society has put that on women and that this company is perpetuating that, you know, sexualized image of women that we all feel at some point that we have to live up to. You know, I don't want to have to live up to that. And I think particularly for younger women, it's so important that they realize that they don't have to. You know, your health and your sexuality are entitled to be separated.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel when you see campaigns that say, save the boobies, save second base, you know, these representations of, you know, perfect, perky breasts that need to be saved? It doesn't even seem to be about the woman. It's about, you know, saving her breasts for someone else's pleasure and enjoyment. I know other survivors have said they hate October. They hate the pinkification of breast cancer campaigns. Do you want to say something about those campaigns more broadly?
Yeah, oh, I feel the same way. I just think it's tokenism, and I think it's insulting to women. I think it dehumanizes us. And if we're not a sexy breast cancer survivor, nobody's interested in us. You know, they're advertising at an age demographic that isn't really involved in breast cancer. You know, it is primarily a disease for women of midlife and older. So, you know, they're sort of making it about them when it's not really about them.
Yes.
And they're giving young people, young women particularly, a really bad perception of what it is to be a woman. You know, they're making it that we are these hypersexualized beings all the time, even in relation to, you know, illness,
Yes.
rather than, you know, just talking about women's health and how important it is to maintain our health and to be vigilant about self-checking and things like that. You know, they're turning it into some sexy thing. You know, even like, oh, you know, have your partner check your breasts.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, check your own breasts, but the way they always have to make everything about sex, it's just like, leave it out. This is health.
Yes. Well said, Angela. Why do you think the McGrath Foundation has ignored the concerns that we at Collective Shard have expressed? We've been calling them out for 2 years for their partnership with the sex shop Honey Birdette. And in their official media statement a few days ago, they mentioned the money that was being made. But again, they didn't address our concerns about the pinkwashing that's going on here. Honey Birdette really is getting more out of this because they get to put the McGrath Foundation logo all over their windows, on their advertising and on their website. But there was no attempt to address that by the executive at McGrath Foundation. Why do you think they are ignoring campaigners and more importantly, survivors like yourself? Like, you had a piece, a really significant piece published by Honey 9 a few days ago, and there's been no response to any of those substantial criticisms.
Yeah, I think it's greed. I think they care about, you know, exploiting money, exploiting, you know, companies for the financial gain. And Honey Birdette is trading on the good reputation of the McGrath Foundation. And, you know, I remember when, before Jane was sick, you know, they, you know, they built up like a wholesome image as a legitimate fundraising entity and respected. And I feel like they've dropped the ball, that they've tainted themselves in a sense by basically jumping into bed with pornographers. You know, I'm astonished, actually, but I think the primary motivation for them is one, that there is a target demographic, which is, you know, people who, you know, it's cool to be sexy. You know, it's cool to, you know, talk about your sex life and go and, you know, talk about your sex toys and whatever. Like,
it's empowering.
Yeah. Because, you know, financial vested interests, you know, have made it cool. And so, you know, women want to be seen to be cool. And they're sort of cashing in on that hypersexualization within society. But at the same time, they're bringing their integrity down. And it makes people who don't agree with that sort of hypersexualization and who think that those images and the things that they are trying to promote are damaging to women, it alienates us. Yes. You know, I have, I have 3 daughters, but I do. And, you know, I don't want them to work at Honey Birdette or to be, you know, I would hate for any of them to be in some of the images that these stores promote, that they have outside their stores. You know, I'd hate them to be degraded like that. And, you know, I'm really disappointed with the McGrath Foundation for, you know, lowering their standards. And they probably think they're adding something by trying to groom young women to understand breast cancer, but in reality, it's a disease that affects older women. And I think it's the women in the main demographic that breast cancer affects that they should be considering, rather than where they get their money from as far as young women are concerned.
Angela, you express it so well that I'm going to ask you a broader question, and that is about these shopping centres that host these pornified portrayals of women, floor to ceiling, all ages audience see it. We've seen little kids out front of those windows. We've seen boys talking to other boys and taking pictures of the images and describing what they'd like to do to the women in those images. And we know what the research says, that objectified portrayals of women contribute to a diminished view of women's competence, morality, and humanity. So this is a serious issue. And the CEOs that head up these shopping centres love to spout that they're champions of change. They promise to drive out sexism in their workplace and in the broader society. And we've been calling on the so-called male champions of change for some time now and saying you can't say you care about sexism and at the same time essentially facilitate and host as landlords of Honey Birdette these pornified portrayals of women. So what would your message be to the champions of change?
Oh, I think it's despicable. I think, what people do in their private lives is their business. And, if they want to sell things like that, go ahead, but keep it private, don't expose that sort of stuff to small children. I think it's grooming. I think it's a deliberate attempt to groom young children into accepting hypersexualization and diminishing boundaries. We have age verification for a reason, and you'll see in all areas of society, whether it be pornography or whatever, children are getting younger and younger and younger and accessing things that are dangerous to them, that are proven to be dangerous to them. And I think that big business is deliberately allowing these things in their stores so they can groom their future customers, that they can groom children as they become young adults to accept exploitation as normal.
Well said. Now, if anyone from the McGrath Foundation happens to listen to our little chat today, what would you say to them directly if you had the chance to eyeball any of them? What would you be saying?
Well, listen to survivors, listen to people currently going through the process. The vast majority of women that I've spoken to within my age group, which are the 45 to 55s, who've been through experiences like mine or through breast cancer or lost, family members to breast cancer. None of us think that it is acceptable, So I don't know where you're getting your feedback from, but it's certainly not from survivors.
Angela, you've been so generous in sharing your personal story, and you have just expressed the issue so well. We wish you all the best with your health journey.
Thanks
for adding your voice to the voice of other survivors. Anyone listening today, we'd encourage you to have a look at our blogs about the connection between McGrath Foundation and Honey Birdette, and also our multiple campaigns against champions of change, and also add standards. Honey Birdette has been in breach of the advertising code of ethics 50 times now, and nothing is done. There's no fines, there's no penalties for non-compliance. So if you'd like to get involved in this ongoing campaign, this has been going around for about 10 years now, please sign up, collectiveshout.org, and join our social media as well. And Angela, thanks again so much. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
No worries.